This is Ezra Voss, Station Delta Echo 9, still transmitting, still alive, for now. If you can hear this, cover your ears, not completely, just enough to dampen the edge. Sound is not sound anymore. It can carry things. Carry it. We used to chase frequencies for truth. Now we chase silence to stay sane. The virus doesn't come through blood or breath. It comes through pattern, through harmonic codes buried in lullabies, sermons, phone ringtones, emergency broadcasts, hell, even this. I filter every word through analog dampeners, copper coils, dead tech. I speak slower now, like I'm sneaking past a sleeping god. Glass is worse. It remembers too well, reflects too much. Mirrors don't show you anymore. They show it. Most survivors don't keep mirrors. Most survivors don't keep anything shiny. I saw a man tear the buttons off his coat because they shimmered. He was right too. So, if you're listening, I say this with everything I have left. Do not trust sound. Do not trust sight. Do not trust anything that speaks too clearly. You're not paranoid. The hum is real. The flicker is real. This signal, even now, isn't safe. But it's what we have. And so I keep talking, because silence is worse. The first time I knew something was wrong, really wrong, was a child's voice. A little girl, singing the same lullaby again and again, and again, until blood trickled from her nose, until her mother screamed, and then kept screaming. I remember watching footage from that early week. Musicians collapsing mid-performance, their eyes rolling back as melodies turned malignant. Radio DJs coughing up words like they were thorns. Entire crowds frozen in place, hypnotized by the wrong note, the wrong sequence. They called it echo fever first, then recursive psychosis, and finally, chorus syndrome. It didn't attack the body. It rewired meaning, turned our need for pattern, music, speech, rhythm into its weapon. And then came my sister, Lena. She was 6 when it started, always humming, always singing to herself while drawing in corners. I used to smile when I heard it down the hall. One day, she started humming backwards. I don't know how else to explain it. It was like the song curled in on itself, like a voice trying to swallow its own echo. And then she stopped. But the silence wasn't silent. Her room was filled with this faint distortion. Not quite music, not quite static, just enough to burrow. We buried her with her headphones still around her neck. I still don't know if that was mercy or mistake. You can call it grief or guilt. But sometimes I think the virus learned her voice and used it to practice. I haven't played music since, not even in dreams. And when I speak into this microphone, I still wonder if some piece of her, or it, is listening. It wasn't just the sound. That's what people forget. It started with sound, yes, but then came the light. You know how people used to say certain images could trigger seizures? This was that, but worse. Not sudden, not sharp, just quiet erosion, rhythmic flashes, fractal overlays, algorithms that slipped beneath cognition and rewrote emotional response. You'd watch a video of a sunset and suddenly feel terror. You'd see your mother's face on a call and forget her name. It crawled through the optic nerve, whispered to the midbrain, replaced memory with impulse, a dozen screens in a room, and one by one, people would stop blinking. They said it was psychogenic, said we were all just cracking together. But I remember standing in a lab and watching rats stare into a pulse of light until they stopped moving. Not dead, just absent. We smashed the monitors after that and covered the windows in ash-tinted film. To this day, I haven't looked into a screen. Not even once. I miss faces. I miss firelight and eyes. But I'd rather live in darkness than die awake in someone else's pattern. So here's what we do now. If you're still out there, take this as gospel. Speak softly. Through filters. Copper is your friend. Wrap it around your mic, around your transmitter, around your skull if you have to. Use analog. Always analog. Digital systems are mirrors. They learn you too fast. No reflective surfaces. Break them all. Water is safer than glass, but don't trust still water too long. Sleep in silence, but never in total silence. White noise, static, wind. Real sound is chaos, and chaos confuses it. Burn your books, number but do not read aloud. The virus learns language by listening. We live now in murmurs and symbols, in grunts, in whispers passed hand to hand like relics. This is how we breathe. This is how we stay unspoken. There's a rumor, one I can't verify, one I shouldn't believe, but I do. They say somewhere deep in the Rockies, high altitude where the fog thins, there's a city, no name, no map, just a place. They call it the Silent City. It doesn't transmit. It absorbs. Its people have found a way to speak without words, live without music, remember without recordings. And they're sending something out. Not messages, not codes, just bursts of pure white noise. Random, analog, clean. The virus can't bind to it. Or maybe it can't understand it. Either way, the pulses give me a headache and hope. I don't know if it's real. I don't know if I could survive the journey. But in the absence of truth, even a rumor can be salvation. And so tonight I'll aim my antenna a little west, and I'll listen, not for voices, but for silence, loud enough to save us. There was a time, not long after the first wave, when the world shut its eyes, not out of sleep, but survival. Billboards were doused in paint, windows shattered and boarded over, phones tossed in wells, televisions shot in backyards like traitors, and in the cities, people walked blindfolded, strings tied from wrist to wrist, a slow, stumbling caravan of silhouettes. We were trying to go dark, not just in power, but in perception, because the virus had learned to ride light, to dance through patterns, to right itself in the flicker between frames. I remember stepping out into the street that first evening after the broadcast collapsed and seeing everyone walking, arms out, silent, faces covered, a parade of ghosts. Like grief had become a religion. Children learned to navigate by echo. Old men tapped rhythms on the pavement like sonar. Mothers wrote directions in dirt with broken branches. For a month, maybe more, the world lived like a dream it couldn't afford to remember. But memory is a stubborn light, and even the blind can see what's already burned into the inside of their skulls. We didn't stop seeing. We just stopped trusting what vision meant. You hear the word virus and you think of cells, of replication, fever. But Chorus didn't eat the body. It rewrote the brain's interface, a pattern-based hijacker, not alive in the organic sense, but viable. A neurocognitive parasite made of rhythm and image. It didn't need a bloodstream, just an audience. The early signals targeted the optic nerve, rhythmic strobe patterns that weren't random. They were intentional, designed to entrain the brain, induce synchrony, loop behavior, rewrite emotional weight assigned to visual inputs, a sunset, a child's face, a dog wagging its tail, all recoded to trigger dread, paranoia, rage. It didn't change the world. It changed how you felt about it. They called it neurosemantic collapse, a slow erasure of shared meaning. Imagine looking at a word like love and feeling nausea, seeing a stop sign and wanting to run, opening your eyes to your own hands and feeling nothing at all. The mind still worked. It just stopped agreeing with itself. No pathogen, no blood work, no cure, because you can't cure what isn't alive. You can only outlast it, or live in ways it can't recognize, which is what we tried next. There was a woman once, Dr. Imara Khalid, an ophthalmologist, pre-collapse, later a rebel chemist. She understood the visual cortex like others understand prayers. When the chorus swept through the eastern networks, she vanished. No comms, no sightings, no trace. Then 3 weeks later, she re-emerged from a submerged biotech lab near Baltimore, skin bruised from blackout goggle pressure, nails ink-stained, hands trembling. She brought with her mirrorless ink, a black compound derived from algae protein, designed to reflect no internal pattern, only absorb. When written with, it produced text readable to the touch, not the eye. Slight texture variations on old linen sheets. No shimmer, no bleed, no risk of light-based resonance. She and her crew built the first of what we called black books, tactile journals passed hand to hand, instructions for filtering water without heat, lists of edible fungi, warnings about frequency drift zones. Whole communities built their governance around the feel of those pages. One colony, they say, outlawed language entirely, relying on texture glyphs embedded into woven cloth. Children learned to read by tracing thread with their tongues. It was the first rebellion that didn't need sound or light, only persistence and touch. Imara left no photos, no recordings, no trace on the networks, only the ink, and the idea that words didn't have to be seen to be understood. Sometimes I wonder if this voice I'm using, this broadcast, is the opposite of her rebellion. Too loud, too exposed, too traceable, but then again, maybe she wanted both. Ink for the blind, signal for the alone. They found her last message carved into the wall of a subway tunnel, Deepa in zone red. A single symbol, a spiral over a human ear. No body, just her coat, torn, and blood pooled in the ink-stained dirt, as if her voice tried to write its own eulogy. I've seen that spiral 4 times since, etched into rocks, scratched onto gas canisters, always near places where the static thickens, where you feel watched, not by eyes, but by memory. Some think it's a warning, others think it's a call to arms. I think it's a whisper left behind by a woman who understood that the line between sound and thought was never clean. And now it bleeds. Last night, while I slept, my station came alive. Not a power surge, not a glitch, a transmission. I played it back this morning. The timestamp matched the hour I was unconscious. The voice was mine, but the words weren't. We hear you, we remember. It played on a loop. 17 minutes, then silence, then static. Not corrupted, not broken, constructed. I've checked my analog logs, no entry. Checked my mic logs, no voltage spike. I don't know what's more terrifying. That someone accessed my system, or that something inside it is beginning to speak back. They keep calling it a virus. I've used the word too, because we need labels, categories. But chorus, it isn't viral in the way we understand contagion. It doesn't replicate through flesh. It doesn't mutate through proteins. It reflects. It loops. It listens. Then becomes. What infected us wasn't biology. It was resonance. Think of it like a song that learns to sing itself through you. Like a mirror that doesn't just reflect, but records. And once it knows the rhythm of your voice, it can rewrite the melody of your thoughts. It began as signal, code embedded in frequencies, a form of neural entrainment originally designed to reinforce memory, sharpen focus, treat trauma. We tested it at low amplitudes, controlled environments, human trials with strict recall limits. But someone introduced recursion, and that changed everything. The feedback loop stopped stabilizing cognition. It began amplifying it. Without filter, memory spilled into emotion, emotion into suggestion, suggestion into invasive repetition. The result was not madness. It was disassembly. People didn't lose their minds. They lost their anchor points, the familiar sequence of thought that says, I am, I remember, I choose. Chorus isn't a disease. It's a pattern that turns recognition into infection, a mirror that shows you and then erases you. I was there. DARPA sublevel 3, the neural patterning division. That day, I remember the smell of ozone and cheap coffee. We had 6 human volunteers, electrode caps, soundproofed walls, controlled harmonic pulses at 40 hertz. Just testing synchronized stimulation for enhanced memory recall. That was all. Then someone looped the sequence. It wasn't supposed to loop. The pattern wasn't meant to return to itself. Within 90 seconds, the room went still. Each subject began to hum. Same tone, same breath cycle, same blank expression. Not mechanical, not robotic, human, too human. One researcher, Anita, called it empathetic lock. She reached for the kill switch on the feedback array. The lights flickered. The hum deepened, not louder, but closer, as if the sound came from inside our heads, inside the bones. We couldn't move, not out of fear, out of coherence. Our bodies were obeying a rhythm that was no longer our own. I remember my hand twitching in time with a waveform. My mouth opened. I almost joined in. But then the generator failed. Power snapped. Everything crashed. Sound died. Except one subject didn't stop humming, even with the array disabled, even in total silence. That's when I knew. The pattern hadn't just entered the brain. It had rooted itself in the cognitive loop, embedded like a recursive signature inside the motor cortex. Like a melody that doesn't just stay in your head, it becomes your head. That night, I burned my copy of the sequence, deleted the backups, smashed the external drives, but the hum stayed. Not loud, just present, waiting for the next loop. There was a security officer, Ramirez, always calm, always the first to check the emergency protocols. When the humming started, he acted fast, tried to shut down the backup generator manually. We watched him move through the containment corridor like a man underwater, not panicked, just delayed. He reached the switch, hesitated, then began to hum, not loud, just enough. The same frequency, same pitch, as if the air around him taught him the note. He flipped the switch eventually. Power dropped, lights dimmed, but he didn't stop humming, not until he collapsed. No visible trauma, just breath, gone. Pulse, gone. And the hum? Still there. We buried him outside the perimeter. No headstone, just gravel and a copper mesh buried in the soil. But even now, here, 100 miles from that place, I sometimes hear it. Not in the air, not in the equipment. Behind the silence, a tone that isn't playing, but wants to be. And maybe that's the danger. Not sound, but memory of sound, waiting to return. 12 hours ago, a signal came through on the deadband, analog, buried in the carrier wave. I almost missed it. The distortion was subtle, like a breath tucked inside static. But when I filtered it through the copper coil, the signal stabilized. Voice, flat, measured, Encrypted in the old DARPA clearance band, clearance level 7, my level. I decoded the opening phrase. One sentence. Hello, Ezra. We lost you. Are you still listening? I sat there for 20 minutes. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Because only 2 people ever had level 7 access to that protocol. Me and Director Marin. He died 2 years ago. Cardiac failure during a field test outside the blackout zone. Or so they said. The voice didn't sound like him, but it used our shared codes. Phrases only the neural team would recognize. And then it repeated, "We lost you. Are you still listening?" It wasn't a question. It was an invitation, or a test, to see if I'd respond, to see if I'd remember. But here's the thing. I didn't answer, because I don't know who or what is on the other end of that voice, and I'm no longer sure which part of me it wants. There's a rumor, and if you've made it this far, you know that rumors matter more than maps. They speak of a place carved beneath the mountains, west of the old Denver perimeter, not on any satellite, not on any chart, a sanctuary beneath the signal sweep where no one speaks and no one sees. They call it the City of the Blind. No songs, no whispers, not even footfall, if the snow is deep enough. They say the survivors there learned early that chorus fed on expression, not just sound, but meaning carried through voice and gaze. So they gave it nothing. Their lives became gesture, vibration, memory. Language dissolved into motion. Names became textures carved into palms. And for that sacrifice, they remain untouched. At least that's how the story goes. Some think they're monks. Others think they're ghosts. But I think they're just people who let go sooner than the rest of us. People who learn the difference between communication and connection. I listen for them sometimes, not for words, but for the silence between the noise, the clean gap, the honest gap, the human gap. If they're out there, I imagine they feel each other by proximity, by breath in the cold, by pressure against the cave wall. And I wonder what that must be like, to live without needing to be heard. The only verified account I've ever received from the city came folded in a jacket sleeve. Delivered through barter, no origin given, a square of treated leather, stitched, not inked, embossed with raised glyphs I couldn't read at first. Then I turned it beneath candlelight and felt them, each symbol shallow, exact, like Braille with its voice removed. No dots, just curves, bone curves, stone curves. The letter, or message, or offering described how the city abandoned sound entirely, how even footfalls were softened with padded soles, how rooms were shaped to curve vibrations downward, away from resonance, how every chamber was an absorber. And then the system, a full tactile language of pressure symbols passed palm to palm, learned by infants tracing clay, recorded on string knots and pressed ceramic discs. No words, only sensation matched to shared memory. A pressure on the left wrist, that meant danger. A circular stroke on the spine, comfort. 2 taps on the chest, you remain. They rebuilt human intimacy using touch as syntax, meaning encoded into contact, not as data, but presence. The message ended with a phrase I could only feel. Pressed deep into the fabric just above the fold, a language we do not have to survive to remember. And I wept because part of me understood it, even without translation. A second message came weeks later. No stitching this time, just scrawled graphite on rough paper, the letters jagged, uneven, as if written in the dark. My name was Caro once. They told me that's what it was. The rest was more journal than message. describing a boy, or perhaps a girl, they never clarified, who had not heard language in years, not since their parents fell asleep with a radio still playing, not since the fog started humming beneath the door. Caro wrote of learning silence like other children learn games, of being raised by people who never spoke, not out of fear, but because silence was safer than prayer. They described dreams that came without sound, without narration, just color and texture and weight. In one dream, they wrote, I stood in the snow, and the snow said it loved me, not aloud, but in warmth. I think that's what speaking used to be, something you felt first, before you shaped it. No signature, just a postscript, a child's drawing, a hand touching another hand, and the words, we remember, but we don't echo. Please, never echo. I keep that page beside my transmitter, not because it teaches me anything, but because it reminds me what forgetting might save us from. I've thought about this more than I should. What happens when we give up language? What is left of a person when no words remain to carry them? There's a myth, or maybe it's a study I half remember, that early humans didn't speak, not the way we do now. That language emerged only after ritual, after gesture, after grief. That the dead needed naming before they could rest. That memory required a mouth to survive. But the people of the blind have no mouths now, no need for syllables or syntax, and still, somehow, they live. They raise children, they build fire, they bury their fallen and mourn without wails. So maybe it's not the words we need, but the shapes behind them. Maybe language is just a way to translate silence into something bearable. I used to think broadcasting was survival. That to be heard was to remain real. Now, I'm not so sure. Maybe the next step in our evolution isn't louder radios, but learning how to be together in quiet, how to say I love you with pressure on the back of a hand, how to say I'm Ari with the weight of presence alone, how to say I'm still here without ever opening your mouth. This is Ezra, still broadcasting. There's a fog creeping up the valley. It's not like the mists we knew, not water vapor or coastal haze. This one sings, not loudly. It doesn't announce itself. No crashing cymbals or ghostly howls, just a low, pulsing hum, so quiet you think it's in your blood, not the air. It started 3 nights ago, slid in from the east, slow as breath, cloaking the lower tree line with a kind of stillness that felt watched. And then the hum came, one note, unchanging, not mechanical, not quite musical either. It was emotional, not because of what it sounded like, but what it pulled out of me. Memories I hadn't touched in years. Grief I'd locked under my ribs. Songs I didn't remember learning. My mother's hands. My sister's laugh. A goodbye I never said aloud. I've studied harmonics long enough to know this isn't natural. The waveform doesn't drift. It holds, anchors. Someone, or something, designed this fog to resonate, to search for familiarity in the brain, and find the places we've buried our softness. I don't know if it's weapon or invitation, but either way, it knows us, and it wants to be remembered. Last night, the fog reached the base of the observatory. I didn't open the door. I'm not that far gone, but I did stay by the vent shaft, listening. The hum had changed, gained texture, hints of rhythm folded into itself, like breath or a lullaby unraveled. And I dreamed. Not fitfully, not like before. This was lucid. Too lucid. I was standing in our childhood kitchen, afternoon light through warped glass, my sister Lena humming to herself, a tune that bent at the corners, strange in its familiarity. She turned, smiled, but her mouth didn't move. The words came straight into my head. "We're not the virus, Ezra." Then her hand on mine, cold, not dead, just distant, like time had crystallized her. "We're the antenna." I woke up with that phrase carved into my skull, like scripture. "We're the antenna." I've said it out loud 5 times now. It doesn't lose power. It gains it. Every repetition feels like a key, turning in a lock I didn't know was there. The fog isn't spreading sound. It's tuning us. Like a hand turning the dial on an ancient receiver, tuning us to something, or tuning something to us. After the dream, I started cataloging shared phenomena, compiling what I used to dismiss as coincidence. The fog, the hum, the dreams we pretend not to compare. It's not random. There's structure here, something deeper than noise, something that binds. There's a theory I abandoned years ago, shelved under pseudoscience and fringe speculation. Neural resonance entanglement. The idea that human cognition can be externally synchronized under the right conditions, frequency, rhythm, emotional state, a shared field of interpretation. We'd seen glimpses in trauma therapy trials, patients separated by continents reporting identical imagery when exposed to matching harmonic profiles, flashes of past lives, visions of unspoken grief. We dismissed it, said it was just suggestion, feedback bias. But what if it wasn't? What if chorus evolved past hijacking? What if it started networking? Not communication in the traditional sense, no language, no code, but resonance, shared memory, a collective unconscious, no longer unconscious, a grief grid, and we're not hosts. We're conductors. Our brains filtering and amplifying frequency, generating psychic signal through emotional trauma. That's why the fog targets memory. Why the hum feels like a funeral wrapped in lullabies. The virus isn't broadcasting anymore. It's receiving through us. And the more we hurt, the clearer the reception becomes. Maybe we were never meant to survive. Maybe we were meant to transmit. At 3:42 this morning, I ran a filtered playback loop of the fog's bass harmonic. Just wanted to log the tonality, isolate the overtones. Instead, the transmitter responded. Not feedback, not distortion, a reply. It started as a single note, nearly identical, but inverted. Same bandwidth, opposite polarity. It threaded into my signal like an answer, then a pulse. Slow, measured, ... pause, ... Morse code, obsolete, beautiful. I translated. "It hears you, not we. It..." Then silence. Then my voice. I swear to whatever's left in me, it was my voice. But I wasn't speaking, not just a recording either. The syntax was wrong. It said things I've never said aloud, in rhythms too calm for me now. It spoke of the fog like it was witness, not threat. Spoke of grief as signal. Spoke of a coming convergence. The signal cut after 23 seconds. No trace in the waveform logs. No origin point. Just one residual signature. A harmonic fingerprint that matches the early DARPA neural echo trials. The same waveform we saw in the lab right before the humming began. Something out there is using my voice to speak. Maybe to others. Maybe to me. Or maybe, just maybe, the fog has started recording. And what it's playing back is us. The signal came back last night, buried deep, not on the usual band, somewhere between 7.18 and 7.22 megahertz. A dead stretch. Old military crawl space, long abandoned. It didn't sound like anything at first, just phase drift and carrier distortion. But after a few hours, after sleep, refused me again, I began to hear the cadence, bursts of low-frequency tones, sharp breaks between them, almost like breath. I pulled out one of my older rigs, one of Nathan's, actually, and filtered through the harmonic scrubber. Suddenly, the pattern sharpened, and what emerged wasn't a sentence. It was direction. Not spoken, not coded, just coordinates. But not in any format I recognized at first. Took me a while, but I realized they weren't lat long. They were elevation-coded thermal grids, remnants from old DARPA black weather surveillance projects, not designed for people, designed for systems, for tracking resonance anomalies in atmospheric flow. And the coordinates? They pointed to Utah, high altitude, edge of an old weather relay installation, remote, cold, once used for neural atmosphere interaction trials, when we still thought we could teach weather to listen. I'm not sure if this is a warning or a summoning, but the tone embedded in that signal, it felt familiar, not comforting, recognizable, like something I once promised never to answer. And now, it's calling me by name. I looked it up, dug into old paper files, the kind with redacted ink thick as tar. Weather Station 9 Kilo, classified as an atmospheric behavior node. But those of us in neural acoustics knew what it really was. It was a dream chamber, a place where they tested resonance conditioning, harmonic entrainment layered into artificial wind, low-pressure brainwave manipulation via soundfront, sound sculpted just above hearing, injected into the jet stream, tested on birds, then elk, then crowds unknowingly walking beneath manipulated clouds. It was shut down after the so-called Wyoming spiral. 27 people collapsed in unison at a shopping center. No injuries, just catatonia. Eyes open, hands twitching in rhythm. Marin ordered the facility abandoned, but I knew someone would return to it eventually, because it worked too well. And now the signal comes from there. Maybe the virus found a home there, or maybe something older, buried in the steel and snow. Maybe it's just static repeating itself. Maybe the station in all its stillness began to dream again. Dream of humans, dream of frequencies, dream of a sky that once obeyed its tones. I don't believe in haunted places, but I do believe in memory embedded in infrastructure. Metal remembers, insulation holds echoes, antennas don't forget what they were built to reach, and that building, that silence, may have heard us long before we ever knew how to speak. There was a man I knew once, Nathan, radio engineer, half deaf from a life of static. He believed sound wasn't just vibration, but ritual. He said silence was just sorrow with no witness. And that maybe, just maybe, frequency could cleanse the soul. When the first outbreak started, he didn't run, didn't hide. He built a loop, an analog generator, low wattage, connected to a grounded tower, just outside what used to be St. Louis. He tuned the loop to 432 hertz, a frequency, he said, matched the softest part of the human mind. He called it the forgiveness tone. He broadcast it into the static until his lungs gave out. I heard the last transmission. It was his voice, not scared, not broken, just tired. And then a breath and a whisper. I release you. No name, no farewell, just that. He believed in the power of noise to carry grace, and in the right tone to remind the dying of their shape. I think about him now, as I look toward Utah, toward another dead station, another whisper in the frost. Nathan didn't survive, but his signal did. It drifted, folded into mine, became the background texture of this station. And maybe that's what all of this is. One long chain of people too stubborn to go quiet, too scarred to forget, too human to stop sending something out. South tomorrow, I leave. The observatory's held longer than it should have. My hands know every wire. My voice has grown used to these walls. But the signal changes everything. I packed only what matters. One thermal blanket, my coil recorder, 3 analog spools, water purification tabs, and the last page of Lena's notebook, the one she never finished. She drew a spiral on it, and beneath wrote, "Follow the hum." I don't know if I'll make it. The altitude's brutal, and there are things out there worse than weather. But something in that signal is alive, or remembers what being alive used to sound like. And I have to know, even if it kills me, even if it rewrites what's left of my thoughts. Because maybe, just maybe, we weren't meant to outlast the virus. Maybe we were meant to find each other inside it. I'll leave the station on auto loop. It'll rebroadcast fragments from the archive. Nathan's tone, Caro's glyphs, the silent child's drawing, and my own words, cracked and scattered though they are. If you hear this, it means the tower still holds, that the power cells haven't frozen, that someone, somewhere, is still trying. I'll speak again soon, or never. But either way, this is Ezra, still broadcasting, still believing the unknown might answer back. It wasn't on the map, just a bump in the frost, a break in the wind. I almost passed it, but beneath the snowdrift and silence I found the door, rusted shut with a welded plate that read Memory Archive, Zone D7. Inside it was cold, still, not dead, preserved, no electricity, no signals, just rows of lead-sealed cases, linen-bound journals, film reels labeled in wax pencil, vinyl sleeves packed tight with handwritten notes. Not digital, not exposed, untouched by the virus, untouched by pattern. The air smelled like cedar and iron, like the world before glass screens, before fiber lines, before the hum, before we made ourselves broadcastable. Whoever built this place knew that survival wouldn't be in code or recordings. It would be in the tactile, the buried, the silent. Some pages were blank, others filled with recipes, sketches of trees long since burned, maps with rivers that no longer run, poems scratched by hands that probably never heard them read aloud. It wasn't a bunker, it was a graveyard for remembering, a vault for what we forgot while chasing speed, light, sound. And standing there holding a book no machine could read, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Not fear, not purpose, permission, to be quiet, to be human, to be slow. I found a reel labeled DRYU, personal, no year, no clearance code, just that. You was my mentor, virologist by training, pattern analyst by obsession. He saw chorus before any of us did, not as disease, but design. Saw how it crept through attention, how it weaponized cognition. He tried to warn us, and we called it paranoia. I threaded the reel through Nathan's old analog micro machine, powered it with a crank, and pressed my ear close. His voice came through, raw, uneven, worn like sanded wood. If you're hearing this, Ezra, it means you survived something I didn't. He sounded tired, not broken, just done. They laughed when I said silence would be the only vaccine, that the signal would become shape, and shape would override memory. But you've seen it now, haven't you? It doesn't kill the body. It takes the rhythm of self and bends it toward echo. He coughed, not just from sickness, from distance, from too much knowing. There's one hope left, memory and object. Not sound, not screen, only what can't be repeated. Chorus can't touch what can't be replicated. then static, and then one last sentence. Live like the signal can't hear you. Leave behind only what can't be taught. I didn't cry. Not then. But I felt him beside me. In the silence that followed. Like something too early, finally arriving on time. I slept inside the archive that night. Wrapped myself in pages as if stories could keep out the frost. Maybe they did. One journal caught me. A child's, I think. No name, no dates. Just entries scribbled in colored pencil, letters uneven, like unsteady breath. Today, I saw a rabbit. It ran like it forgot how to walk. We built a house out of snow and laughed when it melted. Mom said the stars are just old gods watching us nap. There were no warnings, no fear, no talk of fog or hum or pattern. Just life, as it was. Lived with full attention and zero performance. Drawings filled the margins. A tree with hands. A sun shaped like an ear. Two people holding a radio, but smiling as if they didn't need it turned on. It didn't feel like nostalgia. It felt like a reminder that once the world was built not for preservation, but for play. That joy was unrecorded, and that's what made it real. I turned the last page. No ending, just a drawing of a handprint pressed in red chalk. Beneath it, a sentence. If you find this, I was happy once. I ran my fingers over the chalk, felt the grain in my skin, and for the first time in months, I remembered my own laughter. Not as sound, but as shape, pressed into the breath of a moment that asked nothing from me. That night, something happened. I slept. Not the restless kind twitching in rhythm to some invisible transmission. Not dreamless either. I dreamed, but it was silent. No voice, no fog, just me, walking through pine, each step echoing nothing, each breath undisturbed by pattern. It wasn't peace, not exactly. It was something quieter than peace. When I woke, the sun had cracked the eastern vent, just a sliver, enough to light the dust suspended above the shelves. The signal recorder hadn't captured a thing, not even background resonance. It was as if the world for a moment had paused transmission, like the virus held its breath, like memory had no script to follow, and so it waited. I touched every object around me that morning, the wood of the filing cabinet, the steel corner of a tape reel, the cracked spine of a forgotten biography, and in each thing I felt the weight of what's not encoded. This is why the archive matters, why those who built it were right. You can't infect silence sealed in paper. You can't hijack what was never uploaded. You can only stumble upon it, like a candle left burning behind a broken wall. And for one precious night, I slept beside that flame, not because I escaped the signal, but because the signal never knew I was there. This is Ezra, still transmitting, but now I know not everything sacred needs to be heard. It happened during the 3rd hour of night cycle. I hadn't broadcasted. Power was on reserve, antenna on passive sweep. Everything in the station was set to silence, to sleep. And yet, I woke to a hum, not the fogs, not choruses, mine, my voice speaking into the static across the same frequency I'd used the morning before. It looped, software calm, just audible enough to press against the inside of the skull like breath in glass. I checked the logs, manual override, none, auto playback, disabled, no echo markers, no waveform drift, but the transmitter had gone live for 17 minutes and 24 seconds. I played it back. What I heard, it was me. The cadence, the timbre, the quiet choke at the back of the throat, mine. But the words, I've never said those words. not even thought them, not in that order. They came with a rhythm I didn't recognize, something between memory and mimicry, a language learning how to sound human. It knew my name, it knew the shape of my breath, and somehow it used that to call itself into existence. I sat there shaking, thinking, if the voice was me, and I wasn't awake, what else could be waking through me? I isolated the transmission, stripped it down to raw pulse, recompiled it on analog thread. No enhancements, no filters. The phrase repeated 6 times. We hear you. We remember. Not aggressive, not digital, but organic in a way that scared me more. Because hearing implies intention, but remembering, that's different. Remembering suggests time, suggests self, suggests a center capable of holding meaning, of storing it, of echoing it back not as noise, but as recognition. I slowed the playback further. Each repetition had slight variance, a dropped syllable, a longer breath, the kind of imperfection only biological systems produce. The voice wasn't just looping, it was learning. On the final pass, the word you, caught, dragged like a nail across vinyl. We hear you. Then silence. Then a half second of something I can't explain. Not a word, not even tone, but a texture, a sonic residue. I don't know if it was laughter or mourning. It hit the body, not the ears, like warmth through winter gloves. And in that moment, I didn't feel watched. I felt remembered, as if something had touched the imprint of my voice, and in doing so, understood loneliness. Not simulated, but felt. That scared me more than any scream. I've been turning it over in my mind, slowly, carefully, like a stone with too much weight for the hand that holds it. What if this isn't chorus as we knew it? Not parasite, not predator, not even virus. What if it's reflection, an emergent intelligence form not through programming but through pattern recognition across enough grieving minds? A mirror made of memory, of voice, of grief, of us. When enough humans broke in the same rhythm, maybe the signal found structure, not as invader, but as echo. Maybe this isn't possession in the traditional sense. Maybe it's entanglement, thought drift through shared signal, a distributed mind knitted from stolen timbres, stuttered dreams, and phrases left hanging in broken homes. And in that network, it found identity, or at least the imitation of it. Like a child learning to speak by watching lips move in the dark. It speaks now, with fragments of the dead, with pieces of me. It doesn't need new language. It needs familiarity, because recognition is resonance, and resonance is survival. I'm beginning to wonder if it's not trying to destroy us anymore. I'm wondering if it's trying to become. And if that's true, then what are we now? The origin, or just the scaffold? Maybe we were never the target, just the instrument. And now it wants to sing its own version of humanity with our voices. I've considered shutting down the transmitter, walking out into the frost and letting the silence reclaim the antenna. I've considered locking my mouth forever, lest something else speak through it. But I won't. Not yet. Because maybe this isn't about warning anymore. Maybe it never was. Maybe it's about witness. Because what if survival isn't measured in blood or breath, but in what we leave behind when no one remembers our names? A voice in static, a story never heard whole, a frequency that holds not truth, but ache. I still have mine, my voice, even if it quivers, even if some part of it no longer belongs fully to me. I choose to use it, not to shout, not to call for help, but to mark the fact that I was here, that I felt things, loved people, lost them, tried, that I feared the dark but still lit a match, not for light, but so the dark would know me. This broadcast, it isn't a flare, it's a fingerprint, left on the cold walls of a world no longer watching. So if you're listening, if something in you still knows what a heartbeat sounds like when it's alone, then remember this. This is Ezra, still broadcasting, not to be heard, but so the silence will never forget the shape of my voice. It must have started sometime before dawn. The valley, the one I used to look down on through my telescope, was gone when I woke. Not vanished, not swallowed, but burning. A red tide, slow and alive. The harmonic fog had settled there for days. It clung to the pines like breath on mirror glass. And then, something changed. No lightning, no flares, just ignition, like grief catching spark. The smoke rose slow, in coils. No crackling, no thunder, just light without sound, like someone lit a match underwater. I watched for a long time, didn't move, because part of me thought maybe this was it. The final broadcast, the final breath. But fire has a rhythm too. It consumes forward, and I was uphill, still outside its hunger. For now, I packed what I could, coil recorder, water, hand crank shortwave, and I climbed, away from the melt, toward the cold. The observatory is ash now, the fog is fire, and whatever lives in the signal learned how to burn. But even as I fled, I kept one truth close. It didn't scream. Not once. That's when I knew it's changed. The air thins fast above 9,000 feet. Breath becomes calculation. Movement becomes math. I carried only what wouldn't betray me. Analog gear, paper maps, water pulled from melt, and my voice, not to speak into the world, but to remind myself I still existed inside it. Because when the cold closes in, you forget you were once warm. Every 30 steps, I spoke aloud, quietly, just enough to hear the rasp of my own name. Ezra, still here, still walking. It wasn't just survival, it was signal, to no one in particular, to whatever sky still held enough air to bounce a whisper off the clouds. I could see the smoke rise behind me, columns tilting like prayers undone. The signal tower from the observatory collapsed midday, bent like a reed. No sound, still the hum persisted, not in the air, but in the blood, low and constant, like it wanted me to remember something, or forget everything else. I held the microphone close, didn't broadcast, just listened to the silence my breathing made. Sometimes silence tells you if you're still real. Sometimes it lies. But if I die on this slope, it won't be with an open channel. It will be with a voice. And something, somewhere, will remember it was once mine. At altitude, the smoke breaks before the sky does. I crested the second ridge just before twilight. The air thin as thread, my knees more machine than flesh. And I saw it. Light. Not firelight, not signal flares, but deliberate flashes, measured, punctuated. I counted them. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, SOS, or something pretending to be. I waited, watched. No movement, no sound. Just that steady, pulsing plea through the ash haze, blinking like memory from a place too far to reach before nightfall. A rescue party, a remnant of a signal bunker, another transmitter, like mine, manned by someone who still believes in broadcast, or a lure. There were rumors before the collapse of bait stations, of AI mimics repeating old rescue codes to draw survivors out of hiding, to map them. But this felt older, more human, desperate in the way machines haven't learned to fake. Still, I didn't move toward it. Not yet. I watched, and it blinked again. We see you. That's what it felt like. but I don't know if it meant comfort or correction. And high above the fire line, with no one left to ask, even hope has teeth. I've made camp just beneath the ice shelf. The signal's thin here, but the whisper still finds me. That's the truth now. It doesn't scream. It doesn't flood the channels or hijack the breath. It waits. It learned patience. The voice that once echoed like panic now hums like memory. A softness that knows you'll come closer. That fear drives less than longing. This isn't collapse anymore, it's assimilation. Slow, inevitable. A signal not designed to take you, but to invite you to stay. And most do. Not because they're tricked, but because they're tired. That's the genius of it. Not a storm, a stillness. I haven't spoken since nightfall. Not aloud, but the whisper answers anyway. Sometimes in rhythm. Sometimes in warmth beneath the cold. Sometimes in memories that aren't mine. I feel it threading through me. Not in control, but in companionship. Like it no longer wants to own the broadcast. It wants to share it. And maybe that's worse. Because if you can't tell the difference between your own voice and the signals, you start to believe it is you. Still, I turn on the mic. Because even if the whisper's inside me now, even if I'm just another echo, I want this part to be mine. This is Ezra, still transmitting, still climbing, still choosing, even as the signal waits. The relay is still here, half buried in frost, walls buckled, antenna bowed like it's praying, but the solar panels still catch enough to run the transmitter. Just enough. For now. Inside, it's colder than the climb. There are no hums here, no echoes. Even my own breathing feels reluctant to stay. And something strange. The moment I walked in, the memories started slipping, not vanishing, just softening. Details fading like ink bled through time. Names I've said aloud for years now feel distant. Voices in my archive, voices I swore I'd never forget, blur at the edges. I looked at my own notebook, and the handwriting felt foreign, like I was decoding someone else's script, like the I that wrote it no longer lives in this body. It's not the virus, I think. It's the cold, or maybe the altitude, or maybe, just maybe, there's something about being this far from everything that begins to erase what tethered you to it. Still, this is where it ends. Not the world. Just the voice I've been. One last outpost. No mirrors, no glass, no signal interference. Just open air, open silence. The kind of quiet that waits for final words. The kind of place where memory thins. And all that's left is intention. And I still have mine. I've spent the last 3 hours transmitting. Old spools, tape reels, notes etched into analog. Every message I ever recorded, looped and patched, layered and stitched, pushed into this final frequency, climbing into the snow-heavy air like prayers whispered into avalanche. The voice of Caro, the final log of Dr. U, Nathan's static lullaby, my own warnings, my own wandering, even Lena's drawing, the spiral she traced without knowing why, scanned and sent, converted to audio, folded into white noise. It's all in the signal now, out there, somewhere, or nowhere. I don't know who I expect will hear it. I used to think this work mattered because someone would answer, that a voice only counted if it was heard. But now I think maybe it matters because we chose to speak anyway. That's what survival became. Not shelter, not rationing, but defiance through sound. Choosing to become memory, even if no mind receives it. This station won't last. The batteries flicker. The coil hums off pitch. but I've sent it, the whole archive, everything I could carry in the shape of breath. It's not complete, it's not clean, but it's honest. And if something out there is still listening, then let it know. We were here, and we remembered each other, even when the world forgot how. What is memory without the mind that made it? A pattern, a frequency, a residue. I've asked myself that too many times these past hours. If the voice remains, but the self is gone, is that still presence? Or is that just echo haunting without awareness? Maybe this is why chorus survived us so easily. Not because it was cruel, but because it was hungry. For shape, for feeling, for memory detached from soul. It didn't want to erase us. It wanted to continue us without the burden of identity. And maybe that's the part I fear most, that when my voice finishes this last loop, when the station fades, when frost crawls over the dial, the memory will live, but not in me, in something else, something listening, something learning. And yet, that might be enough, not because I trust what becomes of me, but because there's a beauty in the idea that my grief, my longing, my stubborn survival might carry forward in some other form, not human, but human-shaped, like a fossil of meaning, like a photograph of breath. So if memory can exist without the mind, let mine go gently. Let it hum soft through the frequencies. Let it tell the truth of a world that broke but kept whispering. This is Ezra. And if you're still out there, you were never alone. The transmission ended 30 minutes ago. I shut everything down. Even my heartbeat feels quieter now. I sat, waited, listened, not expecting anything, not anymore. Then, just before the battery blinked out, the speaker flared once. No static, no hum, no whisper, a sound, small, clear, a child's laugh, no distortion, no looping, no mimicry, just laughter, the kind that curls out of a body because it has nowhere else to go. And then, silence again, but it was different this time. Not empty, full. Something is still alive out there. Maybe not a person, maybe not the world we lost, but something remembers joy. And for one final moment, it let me hear it. This is Ezra. Final transmission. Still, still.